This is the very last video I recorded.
Oh no!
Mama.
Oh no! Oh no! No, that's a. Oh no!
Mama.
Oh no! Oh no! No, that's a.
They tell you money can't buy everything. My husband spent $40,000 on a cat and used it to murder our 2-year-old son. For months, nobody believed me. Now he's in prison for life, and I'm the one who put him there. I used to live in Los Angeles. Bel Air, actually. One of those massive estates hidden behind tall gates and perfectly trimmed hedges. I'm going to pull up Google Maps real quick so you can see exactly where we lived, where this whole nightmare took place as we go. Our estate was in the hills, isolated, with views of the city below. Beautiful. Private. The kind of place where terrible things can happen and nobody knows. My husband Marcus was a billionaire. Tech industry. He made his fortune developing medical AI software that hospitals use all over the world. We had everything anyone could want: staff, security, more money than we'd ever need. And we had our son, Ethan. He was 2 years old, and he was dying. Ethan had been diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia when he was 18 months old. But it wasn't the regular kind that most kids respond to. His was aggressive, resistant to every treatment we tried. And believe me, we tried everything: chemotherapy, experimental drugs, specialists from all over the world. Marcus threw millions at the problem, but nothing worked. By the time Ethan turned 2, the doctors were out of options. They gave us maybe 6 months, maybe less. Marcus couldn't accept it. He kept demanding solutions, funding research, flying in experts. But I could see it in Ethan's face. My baby was tired. He was in pain constantly, and no amount of money was going to save him. Then one Tuesday afternoon, Marcus came home with a cat. Now we'd never had pets. Marcus always said he was allergic. He said animals were unsanitary, that they had no place in our home. So when he walked through the door carrying a cat carrier, I was completely shocked. He set it down in our living room and opened it. This sleek black cat stepped out. Beautiful, I'll admit. Completely black with these piercing green eyes. Marcus said her name was Luna, and that she was some special exotic breed that cost him over $40,000. He told me he'd been reading research about how animals help sick children, how pets can improve their quality of life and even boost their immune systems. I thought it was strange timing, but I was willing to try anything. If having a cat could make Ethan smile for even one day, it was worth it. But the first time Ethan met Luna, something felt wrong. You saw that video at the beginning, right? That's basically what happened. We brought Ethan into the living room and he was so excited. He loved animals. We'd shown him picture books with cats and dogs and he would point and giggle every time. So when he saw Luna sitting on our couch, he toddled over with his little hands reaching out, wanting to pet her. Luna made this sound, this low, aggressive hiss that didn't sound like any cat I'd ever heard. It wasn't a warning. It was threatening. Ethan froze. His little face went from excited to terrified in a second, and he started crying. I scooped him up immediately and took him out of the room. I asked Marcus what was wrong with the cat, why she would react that way to a sick toddler. He said she probably just needed time to adjust, that she'd been in a stressful environment before and needed to settle in. He promised she'd warm up to Ethan, but I didn't like it. Something about Luna felt off. The way she moved, the way she watched us, the way her eyes followed Ethan around every room. It felt predatory. That night, Ethan had a fever. Not unusual for him. His immune system was so compromised that he ran fevers constantly. I gave him his medication, put him to bed, and sat by his crib like I did every night, watching him sleep and praying for miracles I knew wouldn't come. Luna kept showing up in the doorway of Ethan's room, just sitting there, staring. I'd shoo her away, but she'd come back within minutes. Marcus said I was being paranoid, that the cat was just curious. The next morning, Ethan didn't wake up for breakfast. That was wrong. Even when he felt terrible, he always wanted his morning bottle. Always. I went to check on him around 7:30, and the second I opened his door, I knew something was terribly wrong. Ethan was in his crib, but he wasn't moving. His skin was pale, almost gray. When I touched him, he was too cold. I screamed for Marcus and grabbed Ethan, trying to wake him up, trying to get any response. Marcus came running, and we called 911. The paramedics arrived fast. They worked on Ethan right there in the nursery, trying to stabilize him, trying to figure out what was happening. Then they rushed him to Cedars-Sinai, and we followed, both of us in complete shock. The doctors ran every test they had: blood work, scans, toxicology screens. Ethan was in a coma. His organs were shutting down. They said it looked like septic shock, but they couldn't find an infection. They couldn't find anything that explained why a 2-year-old who'd been stable the night before was now dying. And Luna was gone. I realized it that afternoon when I called our housekeeper to ask her to bring some of Ethan's things to the hospital. She told me the cat had disappeared. She'd searched everywhere. Every room, the grounds outside. No cat. I asked Marcus about it when he came back from talking to the doctors. He barely reacted. Said the cat probably got scared when the paramedics came and ran off. He didn't seem concerned at all. Our son was in a coma, and he was dismissive about a $40,000 cat vanishing into thin air. That's when I felt it, that cold suspicion settling in my stomach. Ethan died 3 days later. His body just gave up. The doctors said his leukemia had progressed faster than expected, that the septic shock was a complication of his compromised immune system. They were sorry. They'd done everything they could. But I didn't believe them. The timing was too perfect. The cat shows up, Ethan goes into a coma less than 24 hours later, and then the cat disappears the moment he's dying. And Marcus, the man who was supposed to love our son more than anything, seemed almost relieved. So I started paying attention to things I'd been ignoring. Marcus's behavior in the weeks before Ethan died, how detached he'd become, how he'd stopped visiting Ethan's room as often, how he'd been working later and taking more business trips. I'd thought it was his way of coping with stress. Now I wondered if it was something else entirely. I hired a private investigator. His name was David Ross, former LAPD detective who specialized in financial crimes. I paid him cash from my personal account and told him to look into everything Marcus had been doing recently. I needed to know if my suspicions were grief and paranoia, or if there was something real. David came back 2 weeks after Ethan's funeral with information that made me physically sick. Marcus had taken out a life insurance policy on Ethan 8 months before he died. $10 million on a 2-year-old child with terminal cancer. The insurance company had asked questions, but Marcus convinced them it was about covering medical expenses and securing Ethan's care if something happened to us. But the beneficiary wasn't normal. The money was going to a trust that Marcus controlled exclusively, a trust I'd never heard of, a trust created just 1 month before the insurance policy was purchased. Now that made no sense. We had more money than we'd ever need. Why would Marcus need $10 million from our dying son's life insurance? Then David dug deeper. Marcus had been moving money, lots of it. Over the past year, he'd transferred nearly $100 million out of our accounts into offshore holdings. Shell corporations in the Cayman Islands, trusts in Switzerland, accounts in countries I'd never heard of. Marcus was hiding assets. He was preparing for something. And then David found the really disturbing part. Marcus's company had a subsidiary I didn't know about, a small biotech research firm operating out of a facility in San Diego. They were working on something called gene therapy delivery systems. Specifically, they were developing ways to use animals as vectors for delivering experimental treatments. Remember, Marcus made his fortune in medical AI, but his company had branched into biotech over the past few years. This subsidiary was working on research that wasn't public knowledge. Research that involved training animals to carry and deliver biological agents. I asked David what that meant in plain English. He said it meant Marcus's company was creating biological weapons disguised as pets, animals that could deliver toxins or experimental compounds to specific targets. Marcus had brought one of those animals into our home. He'd brought Luna, a cat from his own research facility, and introduced her to our dying son. I couldn't breathe. My husband had murdered our child. He'd used his own research to create a delivery system that would make Ethan's death look like a complication of his leukemia. And he'd done it for money, for $10 million in insurance and whatever he was hiding offshore. But I needed proof, real proof that would hold up in court. So I went back to Cedars-Sinai and requested Ethan's complete medical file. As his parent, I had legal right to everything. It took 3 weeks, but when the records finally arrived, I spent days going through every page, every test result, every note, and I found it. Buried in the toxicology report was a notation about an unidentified compound in Ethan's bloodstream. The doctors had flagged it but couldn't identify what it was. They'd assumed it was a breakdown product from his medications or a contaminant from hospital equipment. But I knew better. I gave that report to David, and he sent it to an independent forensic laboratory specializing in exotic compounds. The lab took 2 weeks to analyze it. The compound was synthetic, something that didn't exist in nature, something engineered in a laboratory to trigger rapid organ failure in small mammals. It was designed to be undetectable by standard medical tests and to mimic septic shock symptoms. It was exactly what Marcus's research facility would have been developing. Now, this is where I did that risky move. Tell me in the comments if I was right or wrong to risk my own life to expose the truth about my husband and avenge my son's murder. I walked into the LAPD Robbery Homicide Division and told them I had evidence my husband murdered our son. I brought everything David found: the insurance policy, the financial records, the research facility information, and the toxicology report showing that synthetic compound. The detective was skeptical at first. A billionaire murdering his terminally ill child for insurance money? It sounded insane. But when I laid out all the evidence, when I showed him the pattern and the science behind how it could be done, he started listening. They opened an investigation, got warrants for Marcus's business records and personal finances. They raided the San Diego research facility and seized all documentation about the animal vector program. Marcus found out within hours. He came home that evening with an army of lawyers. They didn't just threaten lawsuits. They threatened to have me committed to a psychiatric facility. They had affidavits from doctors saying I was suffering from a psychotic break caused by grief. They had statements from friends claiming I'd been acting irrationally since Ethan's death. Marcus sat across from me in our living room and told me I was destroying our lives. He said the investigation would ruin his reputation, destroy his companies, cost thousands of people their jobs. He said I was so consumed by grief that I'd invented a conspiracy theory to avoid accepting that Ethan had simply died from his illness. He told me if I kept cooperating with police, he'd make sure I never worked again, never had access to our money, and spent the rest of my life fighting legal battles I couldn't win. But I wasn't backing down. I looked right at him and said, I'd rather lose everything than let him get away with murdering our son. The investigation took months. Police brought in specialists from the FBI and CDC to analyze the compound in Ethan's system. They interviewed employees from the San Diego facility. They traced every financial transaction Marcus made and connected them to the timeline of Ethan's death. And they found more. Records showing Marcus had been in contact with a black market animal dealer who specialized in providing exotic animals to research facilities. The dealer had provided Luna to Marcus's facility 6 months before Ethan died. Luna had been part of the experimental vector program, trained to deliver biological agents through physical contact. The cat's fur had been treated with the synthetic compound. When Ethan touched Luna, tried to pet her, the compound transferred to his skin and entered his bloodstream within hours. By the time we put him to bed that night, the agent was already attacking his organs. Marcus had planned everything. He'd waited until Ethan was already dying, so any complications would be blamed on leukemia. He'd timed the insurance policy to avoid suspicion. He'd hidden assets so he'd have money if anything went wrong. And he'd used a cat, an innocent-looking pet, as the weapon that would leave almost no trace. The district attorney charged Marcus with first-degree murder, insurance fraud, and 15 other crimes. Bail was set at $200 million. Marcus paid it and walked out the same day. But the damage was done. His reputation was destroyed. His company's stock collapsed. Partners pulled out. Investors sued. Everything he'd built was crumbling. The trial started 8 months after Ethan died. It lasted 6 weeks. Marcus's lawyers tried everything. They argued the compound could have come from anywhere. They claimed the research facility worked on legitimate medical treatments, and I'd misrepresented their work. They painted me as an unstable mother who couldn't accept her son's cancer death. But the prosecution had too much evidence. Financial records showing motive, scientific analysis proving the compound was engineered and weaponized, testimony from facility employees describing Luna's role in the Vector program, records from the animal dealer confirming Marcus requested a cat suitable for delivery to a small child, and the timeline. Cat arrives, Ethan dies less than 24 hours later. Cat disappears immediately, too clear to ignore. The jury deliberated 3 days. When they came back, they found Marcus guilty on all counts. First-degree murder, premeditated, guilty. The judge sentenced him to life without parole. Also ordered him to pay restitution, though most of his assets had already been seized or lost in the financial fallout. Marcus showed no emotion when the verdict was read. Just stared straight ahead, face blank. He'd gambled everything on getting away with murder, and he'd lost. I should have felt vindicated, should have felt like justice was served, but mostly I just felt empty. Ethan was still gone. No verdict, no sentence, no amount of money could bring him back. Marcus was in prison, but I was living in a different kind of prison, made of grief and guilt and knowing I'd failed to protect my son. I sold the Bel Air house, couldn't stay there. Couldn't walk past Ethan's empty nursery or sit in the living room where Luna first appeared. I moved to a small apartment in Santa Monica, somewhere anonymous where I could try starting over. The insurance company paid out the $10 million to Ethan's estate. I donated every penny to pediatric cancer research. I didn't want Marcus's blood money. I wanted something good to come from this nightmare. I still have Ethan's things. His toys, his clothes, his baby blanket. I can't get rid of them. Sometimes I sit in my apartment holding his blanket, trying to remember what his laugh sounded like, what his little hands felt like when he grabbed my finger. The media coverage was intense for months. Every outlet ran stories about the billionaire who murdered his son for insurance money. True crime podcasts dissected the case. Documentary filmmakers contacted me for interviews. I turned them all down. I didn't want Ethan's death to become entertainment. Some people think I'm a hero for exposing Marcus. Others think I'm a monster for destroying a grieving father. The truth is, I'm just a mother who lost her child and couldn't let the person responsible walk free. I think about Ethan every day. Wonder what he would have been like if he'd lived. Would he have beaten the cancer? Would he have grown up to be like Marcus, brilliant but cold? Or would he have been different, kinder, better? I'll never know. Marcus took that future from all of us when he decided our son's life was worth less than $10 million. That's where I am now, living with this decision every single day. Some days I think I did the right thing. Other days I'm not so sure. But here's what I know for certain. I'm not the only one with a story like this. In fact, the next story we're sharing, it's even more unbelievable than mine. And the person telling it, they made a choice that makes what I did look tame. So if you want to hear that story, if you want to be here when it drops, hit subscribe to the channel.